The galaxy was vast, and among its countless worlds, there was one that stood out as a symbol of power and fear: Drakara. It was the home of the Drakari, a race of beings known for their strength and mastery over the elements of the universe. Towering figures with scales of pure energy, wings that could eclipse moons, and eyes that burned like the stars themselves, the Drakari were not only feared, but respected by all who crossed their path. At the center of this empire stood Lord Drakkar, the most feared of the Dragon Lords. His name alone was enough to make even the bravest of warriors tremble. He was a being of immense power, commanding respect not only from his own people but from every corner of the galaxy. Yet beneath his strength and authority there was a secret, one that haunted him for years. His daughter, Azara, was born with a defect, a flaw that the Drakari people could not overlook. Azara was far from what anyone expected a Dragon Lord's daughter to be. She was not fierce or flawless in her appearance, like the others of her race. Instead, she was often called ugly by those who dared to speak of her behind closed doors. Azara's eyes were too wide, her scales lacked the radiant shimmer that marked the others as true Drakari, and her wings, though strong, were not as graceful as her father's. Her face, though kind and gentle, was marked by imperfections that no amount of magic or technology could hide. In a society that thrived on beauty and strength, Azara's appearance was seen as a curse, and for Lord Drakkar, it was a constant source of shame. But Lord Drakkar loved his daughter, despite what others thought of her. He could see her inner strength, her intelligence, and her resilience, even if the rest of the galaxy couldn't. Yet his love was a secret he dared not show openly. In a world ruled by appearances, Azara's imperfection could be seen as a weakness. And weakness was something no one could afford in the Drakari Empire. For years, Azara lived in the shadow of her father's name, always aware that she was different. The whispers from other Drakari were constant. "She is unworthy of the Dragon Lord's blood," they would say. "She will never be fit to rule." These words, though harsh, never truly bothered Azara. She had grown up learning that beauty and perfection were fleeting. True strength came from the heart, from the will to endure, and from the courage to stand against the impossible. But the Drakari were not known for their compassion. They were known for their power, and so Lord Drakkar's love for his daughter became his secret shame. He couldn't risk showing affection for Azara, not when the entire empire would see it as a sign of weakness. For the Dragon Lords, weakness meant defeat, and defeat meant death. It was this very weakness, this supposed imperfection, that led to Azara's exile. The ruling council of the Drakari, in their infinite wisdom, had decided that Azara's existence was a stain on the legacy of the Dragon Lords. They viewed her as a reminder of failure, a flaw that must be removed. In an attempt to punish Lord Drakkar for what they saw as his inability to control his bloodline, they ordered that Azara be taken from him. She would no longer live in the safety of the Drakari citadel. Instead, she would be cast away, a living reminder of Lord Drakkar's supposed failure. The order was final. Azara would be sent to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, away from the prying eyes of the Drakari. Her fate was sealed. But Lord Drakkar, though proud, was not a fool. He would not let his daughter suffer for something she could not control. He had lived too long, seen too much, to let such an injustice befall the one person he loved more than anything. The council may have ordered Azara's exile, but Lord Drakkar would not abandon her. He made his decision. Azara would not be sent away alone. She would come to him, to the citadel where he ruled, and there, in the safety of his empire, she would be protected. No one would take her from him. Not now. Not ever. When Azara arrived at the citadel, her heart was heavy with the weight of what had happened. The journey had been long, and the uncertainty of her future weighed on her more than she cared to admit. She had always known that she was different, but the reality of her exile, the reality of being cast aside by her own people, hurt more than she could have imagined. Yet when she saw her father waiting for her at the gates of the citadel, her heart swelled with a mixture of love and pain. Lord Drakkar stood tall and imposing, his wings spread wide, his eyes as sharp as ever. He looked as powerful as he always did, a being beyond mortal understanding. But as he locked eyes with Azara, something changed in his gaze. It was a look of pain, a look of guilt, but also of relief. Relief that she was here, that she was safe. Azara approached him slowly, her steps hesitant. "Father, I didn't want to be a burden," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to shame you." Lord Drakkar looked down at his daughter, his expression unreadable. He could see the pain in her eyes, and it tore at him. She had never asked for any of this. None of it had been her fault. "You are no burden, Azara," he said, his voice low but firm. "You are my daughter, and I will protect you no matter what." There was a long silence as Azara looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She didn't know what to say. She had always known that her father's love for her was strong, but the world they lived in made it hard to believe in anything that wasn't defined by strength, power, and perfection. Azara had never been able to fit into that mold, and she had come to accept it, even if it meant being pushed aside by her own people. But here, in the presence of her father, she felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place for herself in this world. Maybe she wasn't as weak as they had told her. Maybe there was a strength within her that could change everything. "I'm sorry, Father," Azara whispered. "I didn't want to be a failure." Lord Drakkar knelt down, his massive form casting a shadow over her. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly soft for someone of his size. "You are not a failure, Azara," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "You are my daughter, and that is all that matters." The words settled in Azara's heart like a balm. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe them. She was not a failure. She was not a mistake. And maybe, just maybe, her differences would be the key to something greater than she had ever imagined. As they stood together, the vastness of the citadel stretching out behind them, Azara felt a sense of purpose awaken within her. The galaxy had cast her aside, but here, with her father, she would find her own path. And no matter what the future held, she would face it with the strength that had always been inside her. The curse of her appearance, the label of ugly, they would no longer define her. Azara was ready to prove that even the most imperfect among them could rise higher than anyone could have ever imagined. Life at the Citadel was nothing like Azara had imagined. For years she had lived in the shadow of her father's immense power, hearing stories of his strength and authority. She had heard whispers of how the Dragon Lords commanded entire star systems, their rule absolute, their strength unmatched. But now that she was living in the Citadel with her father, she realized just how different her world had been from what she had always known. Lord Drakkar's Citadel was a vast, imposing fortress built into the side of a massive moon, floating far away from the hustle and bustle of Drakkara's core worlds. It was a place of solitude and strength, a symbol of the Dragon Lord's might, but for Azara, it felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. The citadel was full of towering halls, cold stone walls, and vast chambers that seemed to echo with silence. It was a place of power and authority, where every corner seemed to remind her of how out of place she truly was. Her father, Lord Drakkar, was not the warm, affectionate figure she had imagined. He was a being of power, of control, and of distance. He ruled with an iron fist, and his presence was enough to make even the bravest of Drakari tremble. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at Azara, a softness, a tenderness that he rarely showed to anyone else. Lord Drakkar had promised to protect her, but his protection came with a cost. He would never allow her to be seen by the rest of the Drakari as anything other than a burden, a mistake. To the outside world, Azara was still the ugly daughter of the Dragon Lord, the one who could never live up to the legacy of her father. At first, Azara tried to keep to herself, spending most of her time in the quieter parts of the citadel. She practiced her skills alone, hiding her insecurities and doubts behind a mask of quiet strength. But it wasn't easy. She had never been taught how to fight like the other Drakari, never been trained in the arts of war or energy manipulation that her people were so known for. Lord Drakkar, however, was determined to change that. He had promised her protection, but more than that, he wanted to teach her how to be strong. He knew that Azara was different, but he also knew that she could be greater than anyone ever expected. So, he began to train her himself. The first lesson was in control. Lord Drakkar believed that true power came not from brute strength, but from mastery over oneself. He taught Azara how to calm her mind, how to focus on the energy around her, how to bend it to her will. At first, Azara struggled. Her powers felt chaotic and unpredictable, like a storm raging inside her that she couldn't control. But her father was patient. He guided her, showing her how to channel the energy inside her, teaching her how to focus it, how to use it. Over time, Azara began to understand. She began to feel the energy flowing through her, her connection to the universe growing stronger. Slowly but surely, her confidence began to build. Yet despite her progress, Azara still felt the weight of her appearance. She still saw herself as the ugly daughter, the one who would never be enough. She couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how strong she became, she would always be looked down upon by the Drakari. They would never accept her. One evening, as Azara practiced alone in the training hall, Lord Drakkar watched from the shadows. He had seen the struggle in her eyes, the doubt that clouded her every move. He knew she was strong, stronger than most of the Drakari already, but it wasn't enough. She needed more than just strength. She needed to believe in herself. "Azara," he called, his voice low and steady. She turned, startled to see her father standing in the doorway. He had never come to watch her train before, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. "You've made progress," he said, his eyes scanning her movements. "But you are still holding back." Azara lowered her gaze. "I'm not like you, father. I can never be like you. I am not perfect. I don't have the strength, the beauty, or the power you have. Lord Drakkar stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, but his voice soft. "What is perfection, Azara? Is it the shape of your wings, the color of your scales, or is it something more? Power is not about perfection. It is about understanding who you are and embracing it. You are not me, and that is your strength. You are different, but that difference is what makes you unique. It is what makes you strong." Azara looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. But there was none. His words rang true, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe them. "I know you feel the weight of what others think of you," Lord Drakkar continued. "But you must learn to see yourself as I see you. You are my daughter, and that is more than enough." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much time thinking that she wasn't enough, that she would never live up to her father's legacy. But now, in the presence of the one person who mattered most, she began to see things differently. "I will train you to be the strongest Drakari the galaxy has ever known," her father said. "But you must believe in yourself, Azara. You must believe that you are worthy of that strength." The next few weeks were a blur of intense training. Azara threw herself into it with everything she had. She pushed past her limits, forced herself to face her fears, and embrace the energy that flowed through her. And with each passing day, she grew stronger. But as Azara's powers grew, so did the tension within the citadel. The Drakari were watching her, waiting for her to fail. They didn't believe that the ugly daughter of Lord Drakkar could ever be worthy of his legacy. They were waiting for the moment when she would fall, when they could prove that she was nothing more than a mistake. One day, during a training session, a group of Drakari warriors entered the hall, their eyes cold and dismissive. They had come to challenge Azara to prove that she was not fit to stand alongside the Dragon Lord. Azara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She could feel their eyes on her, could hear their whispered insults. They didn't believe in her. They never would. Lord Drakkar stood by, watching silently. He knew this moment would come. He knew that the Drakari would challenge Azara, and he knew that this was the test she had to face. Azara stood tall, her wings unfurling behind her. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. With a swift movement, she summoned the energy around her, her body glowing with the power she had learned to control. The Drakari warriors charged at her, their weapons raised, but Azara moved with a speed that stunned them all. She dodged their attacks, countering with energy blasts that sent them reeling. In that moment, Azara realized something. She was not weak. She was not a failure. She was stronger than she had ever believed, and no matter what the Drakari thought of her, she would prove that she was worthy of her father's love and of her place in this world. When the battle was over, the Drakari warriors lay on the ground, defeated. Azara stood victorious, breathing heavily but proud. Lord Drakkar stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You have done well, Azara," he said quietly. Azara smiled, a sense of pride filling her chest. She wasn't perfect. She never would be. But she was strong. And that was enough. As the moons of Drakkara slowly passed by, Azara found herself at the center of an unexpected transformation. Her training under Lord Drakkar had been intense, and for the first time she felt something inside her stir. Something powerful, something she hadn't known was there before. The more she practiced, the more her energy control grew. Azara began to realize that the powers inside her were far beyond anything she could have imagined. The force she wielded was unique, unlike the raw strength of the other Drakari, and certainly unlike the powers of her father. It wasn't just about brute strength, energy manipulation, or fighting. It was something more refined, a subtle yet powerful force that came from deep within her being. Azara spent days meditating in the quietest chambers of the citadel. She would close her eyes, empty her mind, and let the energy of the universe flow through her. At first, it had been hard. Her mind had always been filled with doubts and uncertainties. But as she learned to silence them, something extraordinary began to happen. She could feel the energy of the entire universe vibrating around her. It wasn't just the air or the ground. She could feel it in the stars, the light, and even the very fabric of reality itself. The energy wasn't just something to control, it was alive, and it was calling to her. Azara's power was different. It was subtle yet powerful. It was like a soft current that could bend and twist anything in its path. And as she learned to harness it, she realized that she was no longer just the ugly daughter of Lord Drakkar. She was something more, something ancient. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Lord Drakkar called Azara to his private chambers. The citadel was unusually quiet, the silence hanging heavy in the air as Azara made her way down the long, echoing halls. She was used to this. Her father had never been one for small talk. His commands were always direct, and his presence was enough to make anyone feel small. But tonight was different. When she entered, Lord Drakkar was standing near the large holographic map of the galaxy that dominated the room. His sharp, glowing eyes were fixed on a distant star system, as if contemplating something far beyond her understanding. "Azara," he said without turning, his voice commanding yet gentle. "I've been watching you closely." Azara hesitated, her heart racing. She couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She had made so much progress, but there were still moments of doubt. She knew her father expected great things from her, and sometimes that pressure weighed heavily on her. "I know you've been struggling with something," Lord Drakkar continued, finally turning to face her. "Your power is growing, and yet you still haven't fully understood it. You have potential, Azara, a kind of potential that goes beyond what I ever expected." Azara's eyes widened. "I don't understand, Father. I've trained so hard, but I still feel like I'm not as strong as you. I don't know how to use my powers like you do." Lord Drakkar walked toward her slowly, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "You don't need to be like me," he said, his voice softening. "Your strength doesn't lie in brute force. Your power is more than that. You have the ability to influence things at their core. You can shape the very building blocks of reality itself." Azara stared at her father, trying to process his words. She had always seen power as something visible, something that could be measured by how much energy you could manipulate or how many enemies you could defeat. But now, her father was telling her that her power wasn't just about control, it was about creation. He stepped closer, and in a rare moment of vulnerability, placed his hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift, Azara, a gift that can change the very foundation of our world. But to unlock it, you must believe in yourself." Azara felt the weight of his words settle on her heart. She had always believed that her differences, her imperfections, were the source of her weakness. But now, for the first time, she realized they might be the source of her greatest strength. The following days were filled with intense reflection. Azara practiced, pushing herself further than she ever had before. As she meditated in the quiet halls, she could feel her power growing. She could hear the universe speaking to her, and as she listened, she understood the truth. Her power wasn't just something she could control, it was part of her. It was an extension of who she was, of everything she had been through. Azara began to experiment. She focused on small things at first. Bending light, shifting the air around her, manipulating the matter in the walls of the citadel. The more she practiced, the easier it became. And then, one night, she reached a moment of clarity. With a deep breath, she focused all of her energy on a small rock in front of her. It was nothing special, a small, jagged stone that lay on the floor, but as she concentrated, she could feel it. The rock wasn't just a piece of the ground. It had a structure, a pattern. Every atom, every molecule was part of something greater. Azara closed her eyes and focused her mind on that pattern. She reached out with her senses, threading her consciousness through the rock's molecular structure. The rock seemed to tremble beneath her touch, and then, without warning, it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Azara opened her eyes, startled. She had done it. She had not simply destroyed the rock, she had manipulated its very structure, bending it to her will. It was an astonishing achievement, and one that made her realize the true scope of her potential. She stood there, breathing heavily, as the pieces of the shattered rock floated in the air before her. For the first time, she felt a sense of accomplishment that she had never known before. She was no longer just the ugly daughter of Lord Drakkar. She was something greater. The next day, Azara returned to the training hall, determined to continue her progress. But this time, she didn't feel the weight of the doubts that had always burdened her. She knew now that her power was not something to be ashamed of. It was a gift that she had to learn to master, just as her father had mastered his own abilities. Lord Drakkar watched from the shadows as Azara began her training once more. He could see the change in her. It wasn't just her power that had grown. It was her confidence. She was no longer hiding from her potential. She was embracing it. And as he watched her, a sense of pride filled his chest. His daughter, once seen as weak and imperfect, was becoming something far greater than anyone had ever expected. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. And Lord Drakkar knew that together they would reshape the future of the Drukhari. But even as Azara's power grew, so did the dangers that awaited her. The Drukhari Council had long been watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. They saw her as a threat, and they would not stand by while she continued to grow in strength. Azara was no longer the ugly daughter of Lord Drakkar. She was a rising force, one that could change the future of the galaxy, and the galaxy was not ready for what was about to come. The days following Azara's breakthrough felt like the calm before a storm. Her power had grown, and with it, her confidence. She felt stronger than she ever had before. Every day, she pushed herself harder in her training, experimenting with new ways to bend the energy around her, trying to unlock even more of her potential. She no longer saw herself as the ugly daughter of Lord Drakkar. She was something different, something powerful. Lord Drakkar had always been proud of her, but now, as he watched her progress, his pride was mixed with concern. He had always known that Azara's growth would attract attention, and not all of it would be favorable. The Drukhari, especially the ruling council, were deeply invested in maintaining their rigid hierarchies. Azara's transformation from an unwanted imperfection into a powerful force was a threat to their control, and they would do anything to stop it. For weeks, there had been whispers among the Drukhari elite. Rumors that Lord Drakkar's daughter had become a problem. They saw her as a challenge to their power and influence. They believed that if Azara's abilities continued to grow, it would only be a matter of time before she tried to overthrow the established order. The council feared what they did not understand, and so they decided to act. Azara had just finished another grueling training session when Lord Drakkar called her to his chambers. She could tell from his expression that something was wrong. There was a storm brewing in his eyes, something she had never seen before. "Father?" Azara asked, her voice tentative. She had learned not to interrupt him when he was like this, but the tension in the air was thick. Lord Drakkar turned to face her. "Azara," he began, his voice low, "the Drukhari Council is planning something. They see you as a threat. They see your power as something to be controlled, something to be feared. And they will not stand by while you grow stronger." Azara's heart sank. She had known, deep down, that the Drukhari would never accept her. But hearing her father's words made it real. The council wasn't just going to ignore her. They were going to stop her. "What are they planning?" Azara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "They are organizing an uprising," Lord Drakkar said, his voice growing grim. "They believe that if they remove you, the threat to their power will vanish. They have rallied the most loyal of the Drukhari warriors, and they plan to confront you. They believe that they can break your spirit, defeat you, and make an example out of you." Azara's fists clenched at her sides. The thought of being used as a pawn, of being cast aside once again, filled her with a burning determination. She had spent so long training, fighting to prove herself, and now the Drukhari wanted to take it all away from her. "I won't let them," Azara said, her voice firm, her resolve hardening like steel. "I won't go down without a fight." Lord Drakkar studied her for a long moment. "I have no doubt that you will fight," he said softly. "But this is not just about power. This is about survival. You must be careful. If you reveal your full potential too quickly, you will give them the excuse they need to destroy you." Azara looked at her father, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. He was right. The Drukhari would never accept her, no matter how strong she became. But even so, she couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. "I understand," Azara said, though her voice trembled with the emotions she was trying to control. "But I won't hide anymore. I won't let them dictate who I am." Lord Drakkar sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know, Azara. I know, and that is why I am proud of you. But you must remember that sometimes strength is not just about fighting. It's about knowing when to fight and when to wait." Azara nodded, though she wasn't sure she understood entirely. Waiting had never been her strong suit. She was ready to face the council, ready to stand up for everything she had worked for. But her father's words stayed with her as she prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The rebellion was coming, and Azara knew that this would be the moment that would define everything. The night of the uprising arrived, and the citadel was filled with a tense stillness, as if the very air itself was holding its breath. Azara stood in the main hall, her mind racing. She had spent hours preparing herself, meditating and focusing her energy, but the reality of what was about to happen weighed heavily on her. She could feel the Drakkari warriors gathering outside, their energy palpable, their presence like a dark cloud that hung over the citadel. Her father stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "They're here," Lord Drakkar said quietly. Azara nodded, her heart pounding. She could feel the power within her, the energy that had grown so strong over the past few weeks, and yet, part of her still feared that it wouldn't be enough. The council's forces were vast, their warriors skilled and powerful. But Azara knew one thing for certain. She couldn't back down. Not now. The doors to the hall suddenly burst open, and a group of Drakkari warriors stormed in. Their leader, a tall, imposing figure with eyes that burned like molten lava, stepped forward. His name was Kale, a fierce and loyal general of the Drakkari army and one of the most vocal opponents of Azara's rise to power. "You are a disgrace, Azara," Kale sneered, his voice filled with contempt. "You are not worthy of your father's legacy. You are nothing but a mistake that needs to be erased." Azara met his gaze with steady eyes, her heart steady. "I am not a mistake," she said, her voice cold, "and I will not be erased." Without warning, Kale charged at her, his blade crackling with energy. Azara raised her hands, drawing the energy around her, but instead of a physical strike, she focused on the very atoms around her. She bent them, twisted them, and with a swift motion, she shattered the blade in Kale's hand, sending the pieces scattering to the floor. The other warriors hesitated, their eyes widening in shock. They had never seen anything like this before. "You think this will stop me?" Kale growled, his eyes flashing with fury. "You think you can defeat me with tricks?" Azara's expression remained calm as she stepped forward, her wings unfurling behind her. "I don't need tricks," she said softly. "I have something far stronger." With a flick of her wrist, the energy around her exploded in a dazzling burst of light, forcing the warriors back. The power that had once felt uncertain now flowed through her like a torrent, unrelenting and unstoppable. Kale's eyes narrowed as he raised his remaining weapon, preparing for another attack, but Azara was faster. With a final surge of energy, she disarmed him, sending him flying back against the wall. The room fell silent as the Drakkari warriors stood in stunned silence. Kyle, defeated and humiliated, could only stare in disbelief. Azara stood tall, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. She had done it. She had shown them all. She was no longer the ugly daughter or the weak, unwanted child of Lord Drakkar. She was a force, one that no one could ignore. Lord Drakkar stepped forward, his gaze filled with pride. "Well done, Azara," he said, his voice low but filled with admiration. As the remaining warriors looked at Azara with a mixture of fear and respect, she realized that the path ahead would not be easy. The council had been shaken by her power, but there would be more battles to come. The galaxy would not change overnight, but Azara was ready. For the first time in her life, she felt truly powerful, and she knew that this was just the beginning. The battle in the Citadel had changed everything. Azara stood victorious over the defeated warriors, but the echoes of the clash still lingered in the air. The Drakari who had once looked down on her now looked upon her with a mixture of fear and respect. Her power had shown them that she was no longer the weak, ugly daughter of Lord Drakkar. She was something more, a force to be reckoned with. But the war was far from over. The Drakari Council, already shaken by Azara's growing abilities, knew that they could not allow her to rise further. Her actions had ignited something deep within their ranks. If they did not act now, they feared that Azara would usurp the throne. They had underestimated her for far too long, and now they were beginning to realize that their time was running out. Azara, though victorious in the moment, knew that this was only the beginning. She could feel the weight of the council's anger, their desire to remove her. The rebellion had only just started, and it would take more than just her strength to overcome the challenges ahead. After the confrontation, Azara retreated to her father's private chamber, where she found him waiting for her. His eyes were filled with pride, but also with concern. "You did well, Azara," Lord Drakkar said, his voice steady. "You've proven to the Drakari that you are not someone they can easily dismiss. But this battle was only one step. The war has just begun." Azara nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. She had defeated the warriors sent to challenge her, but the true battle lay ahead. The council would not stop until they had stripped her of everything: her power, her place, and her right to rule. And Azara was determined to prove that she wasn't going to be easily defeated. "I'm ready, Father," she said, her voice firm. "I won't back down." Lord Drakkar studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I know you won't, but you must be careful. The council is not like these warriors. They will play games with your mind. They will try to turn your allies against you, to make you doubt yourself. They will try to make you question your place in this empire. And if you aren't careful, it will break you." Azara looked at her father, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. She had always known that the Drakari were ruthless, but hearing her father's words made it feel more real. The council had power, far more than she had imagined. "I won't let them break me," Azara said, more to herself than to him. "I've come too far." Lord Drakkar smiled, his pride in her evident. "Good, because you are stronger than they think. The power you have, what you've discovered about yourself, is not just something that will help you survive. It will change everything." Azara felt a sense of purpose grow inside her. She had spent her life trying to prove herself to others, trying to show that she was more than just her appearance. But now she realized that her strength didn't come from trying to be like the other Drakari. It came from embracing who she was, from accepting that she didn't need to be perfect to be powerful. The next few days were filled with tension. The council was planning their next move, and Azara could feel their eyes on her, watching her every move. She stayed in the Citadel, training harder than ever, but now her focus had shifted. She wasn't just preparing for the physical battles that lay ahead. She was preparing for the psychological warfare the council would use against her. Lord Drakkar kept a close eye on her, offering advice and guidance when needed. But Azara was no longer the uncertain girl she had been when she first arrived at the Citadel. She had grown stronger, not just in her powers, but in her belief in herself. One evening, as Azara stood in the training hall, her mind focused on the upcoming battles, she was interrupted by a quiet knock at the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see a familiar face, Lyra, one of the trusted allies of Lord Drakkar. Lyra had always been loyal to her father, but Azara hadn't seen much of her since the uprising. "Azara," Lyra said, her voice low, "I need to speak with you." Azara stepped aside to let her in. Her curiosity piqued. Lyra had a serious expression on her face, and Azara could tell that something was troubling her. "What's going on?" Azara asked, her voice calm but with an edge of concern. Lyra hesitated before speaking, her eyes scanning the room to make sure no one was listening. "The council is planning a strike," she said quietly. "They've rallied their most powerful forces. They intend to attack, not just you, but your father as well. They believe that if they can take him down, they can destroy your support and crush any hope of you ever claiming your rightful place." Azara's heart raced at the news, but she kept her expression neutral. She had known that the council would try to eliminate her eventually, but hearing it from Lyra made it all the more real. "When are they planning to strike?" Azara asked, her voice steady, though her mind raced. "They're gathering their forces now," Lyra replied. "It could be days or it could be hours. They'll strike when they believe they have the upper hand." Azara thought quickly. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was the moment that would decide the future of the Drakari Empire. If she could defeat the council, she would not only solidify her place but also change the course of their entire society. But if she failed, the consequences would be disastrous. "I won't let them take my father or me," Azara said, her voice fierce with determination. "I won't let them tear this empire apart just to maintain their control." Lyra nodded, her face a mixture of fear and admiration. "You are not alone in this, Azara. We will stand with you." Azara placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, grateful for her loyalty. "Thank you. But this battle won't be won with just strength. We need to outthink them, outmaneuver them. We need to find a way to turn the tide in our favor." Lyra's eyes brightened, and she nodded in agreement. "Then let's start planning." As the days passed, Azara and Lyra worked together, gathering allies and preparing for the council's attack. The Drakari were known for their physical power, but Azara knew that victory would not come from sheer force alone. She had to be strategic, to use her unique powers to her advantage. The night of the council's attack arrived, and Azara stood at the ready, her heart calm but her mind sharp. The citadel was quiet, almost eerily so, as the Drakari warriors gathered in the shadows, waiting for the signal. Azara had placed traps around the citadel, using her energy manipulation to alter the very environment, making it a maze that would confuse and disorient the council's forces. When the battle began, it wasn't just a clash of swords and energy blasts, it was a battle of wits. Azara used her powers to bend reality itself, manipulating the environment to her advantage. The council's forces found themselves lost, disoriented, and unable to predict her movements. In the end, Azara's strategic thinking and mastery over her powers proved to be more than enough. The council's forces were defeated, their plans shattered. As the last of the council's warriors were taken into custody, Azara stood tall, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had not only protected herself and her father, but had also secured a new future for the Drakari. Lord Drakar stood beside her, his face filled with pride. "You did it, Azara," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've changed the future of our people." Azara smiled, her heart full of hope. "No, father," she said softly. "We've changed it together, and this is just the beginning." The Drakari Empire would never be the same again. Azara had proven that power was not just about strength. It was about knowing who you were and standing strong in the face of adversity. With her father by her side, she was ready to lead the Drakari into a new era. And as the stars shone brightly above them, Azara knew that the future was hers to shape.